Okay, shall we make a start? Lovely. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Lovely to have you all here today. My name's Lindsay West. I'm a former former person from the steering group of the UK Values Alliance, but currently an organisational member, having stepped down from that a couple of years ago. But it's very lovely to be asked back today to talk about values-based coaching. So I learned about values when I first started learning about coaching, and that was a good 17 years ago now, I think. I was looking at the dates the other day. I've been saying 15 for ages, but of course it is now 17 years. So that's when I first learned about the importance of values. And I've been proactively and consciously using values myself in my own life and in my coaching practice ever since, and have developed that work over that period of time. So very happy to be talking to you today about values. So I'd like to just share my slides, if that's okay. And there we go. Okay, can I get a thumbs up, Charles? Can you see the slides okay? Yeah, fabulous. All right. So that should push my picture and others over to the side of your screen. You can drag that around to a convenient position if I'm in the way of your you're seeing those slides. So hopefully that's okay now. Lovely, super. So let's just move on. So I thought I'd start off by just talking a little bit about what coaching is, because I don't know how many of you are coaches on the call, but if you're not, it might just be useful to have a little bit of an understanding of what coaching is. So when I first learned about coaching, I used to describe coaching as being different to counselling, in that counselling is helping people get from where they or deal with the stuff from the past and get them to a good place in the present. Whereas coaching is about looking at where you are now and where you want to get to in the future. Now, that is still true, but there's quite a blurring of boundaries, I find, these days. So as I've developed as a coach, I've learned lots and lots of new skills. I find that I tend to bring in different interventions into my coaching sessions, depending on what I'm working on with any given client. And it also depends on the type of client I'm working with as well. I work with individuals, I work with organizations and people in many different industries and across all different sectors. So this slide and I nicked this from somebody online because I thought it was quite a good representation of the different aspects of coaching. So there's coaching in the center there, and you see the overlap between the different other aspects. So we've got consulting up on the left-hand side there. So my previous career was in finance. So I've got leadership and management experience that sometimes I can draw upon to support people in an organizational environment. Mentoring, I would use some mentoring skills if I was talking to somebody who is running a small business perhaps, or is self-employed. So there might be some past experiences and wisdom that I can share there. Training, I do a lot of this, so as well as coaching. So there's often opportunities to talk about techniques and share tools and techniques that I use in my work with my clients. And as I mentioned, counselling before, sometimes you do find that aspects of people's past do play quite a big role in their present, and also maybe a barrier to their future. So often I do explore things from the past to help us to overcome any barriers or limitations to making progress in the future. So coaching is a mixture of all of those different aspects. I hope that gives you a bit of an understanding there. I should have said, if you want to ask any questions, do please raise a hand. I think Jackie's going to watch the gallery because I can't see you all from my screen. So if you do have a question, do either shout out or just raise your hand, and Jackie will let me know. I will take questions at the end, but if you want to ask anything about what I'm saying in the moment, then please do just stop me along the way. Okay. So next slide is about a little bit about the type of coaching I do. So when I was trained, and this was a little while ago now, all coaches were pretty much trained to be very non-directive. So it was all about listening skills, asking good questions, feeding back, and so on. But over the years and over experience, I've found that that's just not enough for most clients anymore. So people have very complex problems. People expect more for their money. So if I'm working with organizations, if I'm working with executives and senior professionals, then they want a bit more out of me than just a bit of listening. So I do find that my coaching has moved quite a bit further down that spectrum of directive to non-directive. So rather than it being much more at the non-directive end that it was originally, I do definitely give feedback, make suggestions, quite often offer guidance, and sometimes give advice. So it just depends on what we're working on and what they're looking for, and the situation that they're in. So very much moving down that scale. And really what happens is it depends on each client as to which skills you draw upon, which elements of experience you would draw upon. So I don't get as far as instructing. I think that's a little bit too far down the line for coaching, but certainly the rest of the things on that spectrum, I would say, are very much part of coaching practice these days. And I think that coaching is no longer just a place where you're listened to and people just ask you questions. So I don't know if anybody has any views on that, because that's not always how it's taught. So if anybody has any questions, do step in at this point if you want to ask anything. Nope. Okay, that's fine. All right. So as I mentioned, I first started to understand the importance of values when I first learned coaching. And over the years, having used coaching, having used values in my practice, I started to draw together a coaching framework, which I call the I Value Coaching Framework. And this is very much a values-based approach to coaching, which incorporates values into all aspects of my coaching practice. So I developed this framework. So it's a 6-step program. And it starts, the first 3 steps are really about helping clients to understand and explore their values and work out which values are most important to them, and generally raise their awareness of those values and raise awareness of how those values are affecting them in their day-to-day lives. And then the second 3 steps, the L, the U, and the E, are very much about learning to use values in their day-to-day lives. So a good set of techniques for things like goal setting, for understanding emotion, for planning, for prioritizing, for making decisions and taking action. So all of those things incorporated in the second part of the program. And understanding the values of others is also hugely important when you're coaching, because often people's issues are in relationships, or they might be in terms of communication. So understanding the values of others comes through very much there too. So my coaching framework has been developed over a number of years, and I published it in my book, as you can see there, Coaching with Values, in 2015. So that's been around a little while. I have a training program from that and a series of workshops. So I can point you in the direction of how to find out more about those towards the end of the session. Okay. So what we're going to look at today we'll look at the V steps, so the values exploration, and I'll talk you through how I do that with my clients, and then we'll take a couple of techniques from the L step, the living a values-led life step, and I'll talk you through how I use those techniques in my coaching practice as well. Okay, so here's the values list I use. I think there's something like, I think it's 132 values on there. Now, you may have seen values lists before. There's certainly some values lists that are used by the UK Values Alliance that we've used for various different training sessions and exercises and corporate work before. So this values list has been shaped actually through the pandemic. So virtually all of my coaching used to be face-to-face, but now it's 100% online. So I had to adjust some of the techniques I was using to make it a little bit more online friendly. So rather than sitting next to somebody and sharing the list of values and talking through what they all meant and people pointing them out and circling them somewhere that I could see, you just can't, it's very difficult to do that on Zoom. So what I did was reorganize the list of values that I've always used into categories. So the first two columns there being relationship values, the next two being career values, and then some life values, so things outside of work, might be hobbies or health type values, and then the final column being world values. Now, of course, that's just a very generalized view of what those values might, the areas, aspects of life those values might relate to, but it just makes it a whole lot easier for exploring those values in a coaching session. There is, of course, crossover across those various categories, and some you'll see in two categories, but it does make it a lot easier. Now, this list isn't exhaustive. It just happens to be the ones that I use in my coaching. And that's mainly been developed through experience of people choosing values. So having done, I don't know, I've never counted how many times I've done a values exploration, but it must be probably into the thousands by now, I would say. This is the kind of most popular list of values that people choose. So there are some on there that come up very regularly, and some that are perhaps not so regular. And there are some that you might see chosen in particular industries. So the second, just to give you an example of that, in the second career values column, some of the values there might strike you as a little unusual, but I did some work with NATO a while back, and working with people in the military, things like duty and honour and discipline and obedience and authority were featured in pretty much all of their value set. So it really depends on people in different industries, people in different walks of life, different careers, and different life experience. So people have a huge variety of values. So I tried to pull together here a list of the most popular ones that I come across. So it gives you a bit of an idea and way of choosing. So what I do in terms of helping people to explore their values is to share this list with them and then ask them to consider different aspects of life. So we look at relationship values first of all, and I ask them to think about relationships that they've been very happy in, and think about the kinds of values that are important to them in those relationships. And then perhaps get them to think about relationships that they've not been happy in, and then they might explore which values were missing in those relationships. And then think about any other aspects of relationships, different people in their lives, perhaps family, friends, maybe work colleagues too, and just think about what really matters to them with the relationships they have with those people. So from that questioning, I then get them to select maybe 10, 12 from the first two columns there, looking at the things that matter to them. And so they will just, if they're doing it online, they might highlight those words, or they might read them out, and I'll just tick them on the sheet. And then we move on to career values. I'm looking at jobs that they've enjoyed and thinking about, what aspects of career are important to them, which jobs they've enjoyed and those values have been met, and perhaps thinking about other careers or jobs that they've done where they really haven't been happy, and again, which values were missing. They might also want to think about future careers there and think about, perhaps which things that they aspire to have in future careers, even if they haven't got them right now. Okay, so again, you would select maybe another 10 or 12 from those two columns. Then moving on to the life values. So that's looking at things outside of work. So they might be considering perhaps hobbies or exercise, health related things there. So again, looking for probably about another 5 or 7 values from that life column. And finally, world values. So these are kind of bigger picture world values. So this is really looking at, what really matters to you in the big picture. What are the things that perhaps get you angry if they're not being seen in the world, if there's things affecting us, perhaps on the news, what are the things that get you going? What are the things that make you angry? And quite often that's world-related issues where there's some base values that matter to you. Justice and fairness often come up there. Equality is another one, diversity and sustainability. So those are all big picture values that people will know very much that that really matter to them, but don't perhaps come up in some of the other aspects that we've been looking at. So ideally, a client would have chosen maybe 35 to 40 values from that list through that exercise. And then what we do is hone that list down to their core top 10. Now, I like to choose 10. I like to have a core set of 10 because it gives good breadth. It gives a good variety, good breadth of values, which is really, really useful in coaching because it can help to support any different aspect of work that you might be focusing on. I think if you only choose maybe 3 or 5, it really doesn't give enough breadth. 10 is a really solid number for covering just about any aspect of life and work that somebody might want to focus on, and I'll explain a bit later why that's quite important to have that breadth. Okay, so any questions on the values list there, or on that technique? No, all good.
I'm just curious about the value of family. I don't see it on the list.
No, you don't. And money's not there either. So that's those two come up quite regularly, and people say, "Oh, what's the reason for that?" Because family isn't a value in itself; it's an aspect of life, and you may have a number of family values. So what I would do with a client in that instance, if they talked about family, would be to just really look at in their relationships with their family which values are important. So sometimes you find that a family will have a set of values that they all adhere to. So there might be things like, they've been taught or they teach their children kindness or generosity or contribution, consideration, those kinds of things. So, or it might be in a family of many generations, it might be love, it might be support. So if you think about which values are important in your family, then you'll get closer to what really matters. And I would group those as family values that would come under those relationship ones. Does that help? Is that okay? And people sometimes say, well, what about money? Money's important to me. And yes, money's important to lots of people, but actually, really, it's about what money can give you. What does money give you? And that might take you closer to understanding what values matter. Values are positive human qualities. And if you keep that in mind, then you won't go too far wrong. So as I said, this isn't an exhaustive list. So it may be that, there are other values that you want to add on to there, but I would say don't include family and money, because those are a bit of misnomer. They're not really values in themselves. Does that answer your question, Yogita?
It answers, and also I'm thinking, because I'm working with methodology where family is value, but it's interesting to think about it.
Yes, and
that it's different views.
Yes, absolutely, and I do understand that. But if you say, because family is important to everybody, so it doesn't really give you any additional clarity in terms of what really matters. So if you break it down to a deeper level and look at which values are important to your family, you can take that whole relationship a lot deeper and really explore the things that are an issue perhaps within families. If you're working with a family, you might want to look at what those values are that really matter, and work through those and explore them, because you might find different people within a family value different things. So to explore those at a deeper level will help to identify any issues. And family is just a bit too high level really to be helpful when you're coaching through a technique. Okay, lovely. All right. Any other questions? Okay. So once we've done the exploration and you've got your list of 10, what I like to do then is group up all the other values that were chosen. So you might have a selection of values from the relationships column that might all come under love, or you might have career, you might choose achievement, and you might have a few other values that you would sit with that one. So trying to group them up into underneath those core values is quite helpful. And I'll just show you the next slide, which is an example value summary. So this is what I end up with at the end of a values exploration session. So you would have in the second column there your top 10 values, and then in the interpretation column you would then have the other values that you've grouped up around that value. So for example, there, love is the core value, and then you might choose belonging, connection, loyalty, and friendship as values that sit well with that value of love. Okay. Karen, did you want to ask a question? I think your microphone's on. Maybe just mute yourself if you didn't have a question. Okay. Or perhaps Charles, you can do that. Okay, so we've got the values, we've got the interpretation, the other values grouped with them. So then we would prioritize those values. So looking at putting them into an order of importance. So starting with 1 being the most important value and 10 being the least of the 10. Still very important. They're still your top 10, but are less important perhaps than your number 1 value. And then finally, on the right-hand side of the template there, we would score those values. So looking at how closely the client is living their life in line with that value. So for example, on the love value, this client chose an 8 out of 10. So they felt they were living their life aligned to that value at an 8, but they wanted to set a target of 10. So they wanted to get better at honouring that value in their lives. Okay, so you'd have a score. No, you don't necessarily have to have a target for every value, but good to have a score when you first do this. And then what I do at the end of the coaching sessions, I would rescore those values to see what improvement they've made and how, the strides they've made in terms of aligning their lives to those values. Okay. So any more questions on the exploration and the value summary? I'm very happy to share these slides after the session. I can also send you the templates, the values list and the values summary. So if you want to have a go at it yourself, I can even send you the values exploration technique, the wording of it as well, if that's helpful. So perhaps leave your email addresses in the chat box, and then we can send you those slides and the templates if you're interested. Okay, I'll move on now. So this is a little different. One of the questions that Jackie asked me to consider when I was preparing this talk was looking at what works and what doesn't. And when I mentioned before about having a broad range of values, so broad range of values, those top 10, that's because I've found over years of coaching that it's actually really, really important to have that breadth of values so that you don't end up focusing on one value at a cost to your other values. So if you only have 3 or 5 values that you're focusing on, then there is a risk that you will be concentrating all your effort and energy too much into one aspect of your life. And that can often lead to a neglect of other aspects of life and other things that might be important to you. So having that 10 gives a good breadth, as I say, and the idea is that you would pay attention to all of those values and not be honouring one at a cost to another. That comes into play very much so when you're looking at planning actions and goals and so on, to make sure that you don't do one thing in line with one value, but at a cost to another. So you should always make sure there's positive impact on all your values and not negative impact on others. Okay. Now, the other side, the reason for the light and dark here is that some of the work I've been doing over the last year or so has been focused on the work of a chap called Shirzad Chamine, who has developed the work of positive intelligence. And he talks about saboteurs, our inner saboteurs. And these are like the kind of dark side of values. And our saboteurs develop when we take our values to an extreme. Now, I haven't talked about this work at all yet at the Values Alliance, so it's lovely to be sharing this today. But it may be that for some of you, this isn't something that you've heard about before, but it's definitely something that I'm really exploring at the moment and finding very, very interesting and extremely useful in my coaching practice. So I thought I'd just mention it today. I can give you links if you want to find out more about that at the end. So just to give you some examples of the saboteurs that Shirzad talks about. So he has the hyperachiever. Now, achievement or success or excellence comes up very often with the professionals that I work with as one of their core values. But if that value is taken to an extreme where they honour that value way more than all of their other values or at a cost to some of their other values, then it can lead to saboteur behavior of the hyperachiever. And then that leads to things like burnout and, impact on your health. So where you're driven to achieve your goals very much and, too strongly, if you like, then it can lead to a place where you're so focused on your achievement that you've neglected your well-being or your relationships. So that's what he describes as a saboteur. So I'm doing some work to look at which values taken to an extreme create some of the saboteurs that he talks about. And there are other ones like he talks about the stickler or the perfectionist, which is a behavior trait many people can identify in themselves. And that's often where values of excellence or quality may be taken to an extreme and applied to absolutely everything, rather than having some moderation of when you apply that value and looking at an appropriate use of that value, rather than, again, it being taken to an extreme to create that stickler saboteur. There's another one, the hypervigilant, which is really interesting, and one that I've been a bit subject to in my past years. The hypervigilant is one where you become a bit of a worrier or a bit anxious about things, double checking, triple checking things, doing things over and over, practicing things, and so on. And the hypervigilant is born from a value of safety or security, having things as safe and as secure as they possibly can be. And it might be for yourself, but it might also be for others. So it might be for your family, or it might be for other people that you care about. So if you have any worrier tendencies and tendency for anxiety, then that hypervigilant might be the saboteur, born out of an extreme of that sense of safety and security. So I'll give you one more. So the pleaser is another one. So this is where people take their values of kindness, compassion, caring to an extreme where they neglect themselves. So it's always putting other people before themselves. And it's fine to put people before yourself sometimes, but not all the time, and not to a point where you neglect yourself. So anybody recognize any of those saboteurs in themselves? Anybody recognize those values as being perhaps ones that they've maybe taken to a bit of an extreme?
Lindsay, just to ask one question on that. I recall a year or two ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, you talking a lot about the healthcare professionals you were spending time with.
Yes,
maybe still are, I guess. And that was and the issue of burnout, which I'd have thought had a lot to do with this sort of issue, didn't it?
Absolutely.
Extreme in many areas. A lot of the things you just described in relation to saboteurs.
Yes, absolutely. So those actually are some of the ones. So the pleaser one, definitely, where compassion is always for other people and never for themselves. Doctors tend very much to look after others and really neglect themselves. So that's definitely a factor. And there are an awful lot of people in the health community that want really demand high levels of excellence and quality, and when they're not able to give that because of lack of staffing or lack of resources, it does cause them some big problems, and they really don't like it. So those sticklers in them get very aggravated, and it makes them very angry and frustrated when they can't deliver the levels of service that they want to. Absolutely.
It's sometimes from the circumstance, it's not just say a psychological flaw where people are just trying too hard. It's sometimes they're just in a situation.
Oh yes, I mean it can be born out of many different circumstances. Yes, it's not a flaw really. It's just where people have learned behaviours of taking these things to an extreme and neglecting the balance across all of their values or from themselves to as well as to others. And I see the hyperachiever very much in some of my corporate clients. I work with a lot of people in corporates in the world of finance, and they're incredibly driven people, and their drive for achievement and ambition and success is so huge that again they can very easily neglect themselves or their families or their relationships, and you see that saboteur very strongly in some of those people. Yeah. So okay, Kath, I don't know if you've got any comments on this. Kath, I've been working with a bit, and Kath has been exploring some of her saboteurs. Is there anything you wanted to add from your own experience there, Kath? Sorry to pick on you.
No, not at all. Just to say that the saboteurs thing I found really fascinating, and the book that you mentioned is particularly interesting for everybody, I think. When I first met you, we started talking about values. That because I'm quite a logical person, it really helped me understand my reactions to other people's behaviors and all that kind of stuff. And then the saboteurs thing is another level, isn't it, in terms of understanding yourself and how you approach different situations. So the two things together seem like a really good system, and really keen to explore the saboteurs thing a bit more. Yeah.
And were you able to see the link between your values and the saboteurs? Can you see where those saboteurs are born from, you know, from the extremes
absolutely.
of those values?
I think when you first said that the saboteurs thing is values to the extreme, that's quite a hard thing to accept, first of all, on face value. And then when you start exploring it a bit more, you can definitely see those behaviors going across both things. So yeah, I think it's really interesting for lots of people.
Lovely, thank you for sharing that. Any other questions, any other thoughts?
Lindsay, go ahead, Jackie.
I was just going to echo that, but in a different kind of language. In a lot of the work that I do, and I know a lot of the work that Barb does, there are some values where we will talk to folk about the potential for it having an Achilles heel, to have a point of vulnerability where the circumstances may be stimulating you to absolutely live it out to the full, but maybe there's something else in your hierarchy which would give you a better outcome. So if I take the example of the value of calm, which is doing what is necessary to maintain a peaceful social environment, nothing wrong with that. Phenomenal skills flow from having practiced that, of being able to read the room, of being able to build rapport, of being able to mend fences, build bridges, all of those sorts of things. However, sometimes the argument needs to be had, because it come into the open. There is a conflict that cannot be resolved if the oil is poured on the water. So so the light and dark thing is an interesting one. So we tend to talk in terms of kind of proportionate application of the value, but just being mindful of whether they're for you and how you practice it, whether it has an Achilles heel aspect, because that's just totally and utterly human. You know, why would we not really want to be able to use this thing that we've honed so very well? But maybe take a breath, you take a moment, you kind of go, is this going to take us where we need to go next? So just echo that. Now somebody had their hand up, and because I've been wittering, I missed it. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, that was me. So I'm Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
Gosh, this is me, and like I'm a recently qualified coach, so starting out my career, but I am in healthcare and disability services. So this is me you're all talking about.
It's all of us.
It's all of us, and it's like, and it's really lovely to understand it more, understand it deeper, and to be able to explore it and understand what this is. Because the longevity in a career like this it'll be more sustainable. I just see we're all crying out for this balance and understanding it more. And there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of support to be offered to people.
Indeed. Okay, thank you for sharing that, Lisa. So yes, absolutely. It is about balance. It's about honouring all of your values, not one at a cost to the others. And the way to tell whether you're living your value or whether you're letting your saboteur manage you is to notice the emotion you're feeling. So if we're living our values, then you feel very positive emotion. You feel really good. If you're allowing your saboteurs to control you, you'll feel a negative emotion. So, it might be sadness, it might be regret, it might be anger, it might be shame, it might be guilt, it might be frustration. So all of those negative emotions are born from the saboteurs, and where things are where your saboteurs are in control of you. So it's about learning to live your values and manage your saboteurs. They don't go away. They're within us. They're all within us. It's just a question of understanding them and using that moment of anger. Shirzad talks about it being like a hot stove. So use that moment of anger about something, like, putting your hand on that hot stove to use it to just take your hand away. Notice that anger has arisen, but then use your values, all of your values, to help you to find a way forward to deal with whatever the situation is. So use the saboteur response, that negative emotion, as a flag to do something rather than staying in that negative emotion for a long period of time. So a lot of that work is about moving away from those negative emotions, using them as a flag to do something else. But then you activate your values and use your values to guide you into whatever the action is that's needed. Anyway, this sounds like we're moving into a whole nother workshop here.
I jumped in over Alan before. Alan, what did you want to say?
A couple of questions, actually, thanks. So the first one is, in this work, does the guide talk about unconscious saboteurs at all? Because I'm thinking of a situation, perhaps you mentioned excellence and perfectionism. It might be that you're bowling on merrily with your value of excellence, annoying the hell out of everybody else around you, and you don't actually realize.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering whether he talks about the unconscious situation. Absolutely.
I mean, until we explore them and understand them, they're unconscious most of the time. So, you know, Kath will back me up here. I'm sure you don't know you have these saboteurs. You don't know they're bad for you. Most people think their saboteurs are good for them. So, you know, my hyperachiever is the one that's made me successful in 2 careers. My hypervigilance, the one that's made sure my family are still alive. You know, you convince yourself that the lies of the saboteur convince you that they're good for you, but actually, because they're such extremes of behavior, they're not good for you. And what they lead to is, you know, quite a lot of unhappiness, actually. So if we can live our values, we can be happy and successful. If we allow saboteurs to get hold of us, we can probably be successful, but we won't be happy because we're full of negative emotion all the time. So there we go. Just a little summary of the whole of Shirzad's work. I mean, it's a huge piece of work, and I'm very happy to do another workshop separately on positive intelligence. But if you're okay, I'd like to move on now to just talk about a few more of the techniques that I use with values. Is that okay? Super. All right then. So. All right, so we've got here the GROW model. So, oh no, I've done it again. I keep pressing I'm trying to move the picture out of the way. Hold on one second. Let me just, there we go. Right, so we've got the Grow with Values model. So some of you, if you have trained as coaches, you'll be familiar with the GROW model. It's used in lots of organizations, but it's also used in training coaching. So GROW just simply stands for goal, reality, options, and way forward. And anybody can use this. You don't have to be a coach to use it. It's just really a way of figuring something out to get you closer to where you want to be. Now, generally people use this model for big goals like, you know, I want to get a new job, or I want to start a new relationship, or I want to, you know, travel the world, whatever it might be. So people think about goals in terms of things that they want in life. But the way I use this model is to actually choose a value that you want to enhance in your life and make that the goal. So rather than it being getting a job, make it about, you know, the value I want to enhance is success, perhaps, or it might be contribution, depending on the type of job that you want. So think about the value that you want to enhance and make that the goal. So you might want to just note down, think of a value that you want to enhance and make that your goal. And then the next step is reality. So that's looking at your current reality in respect of living that value, how you're living that value in line with your life right now. And for this, we break down a score out of 10. So you might have given a score out of 10 in your value summary previously. So you would note that down. But you can break it down even further using the values triangle that some of you may have may be familiar with from some of my work previously. So the values triangle, that's just shown in the bottom right hand corner of the slide there. Hopefully you can see that. So the values triangle looks at 3 aspects of values: how we honor that value to ourselves in the me to me. On the left-hand side there, how we honor that value to others in the me to others. And then on the right-hand side, others to me. So how other people honor that value to us. So you might want to break down in that reality section there, think about different aspects of that value and, where the issue is. So if you break it down, you can probably see where you're not aligning that value in your life, where there's some lack, and where you could make a bit more of an improvement. And then the next step is to list options. So you can be as creative as you like there, look at how you can enhance that value, and as many options as you like. And then finally, you would choose a way forward. So selecting one of those options as your way forward, the action that you want to take. Now, this is another step where you would look at all of your values again. So what you want to do is make sure that the action you choose is one that's aligned to all of your values. So it may be focused on enhancing one, but you also need to make sure that it's aligned to all the others. At least it leaves them neutral. You don't want any negative impact on any other values. Otherwise, you're just creating a new problem for you to solve. So, so think about being specific about your way forward, choosing an action, and making sure that that's in line with all of your other values. And you might also want to draw on some of those other values to help you to take that action. So sometimes people might draw on a value of perhaps inner strength or courage or adventure to help them to do something difficult. Or it might be that they draw on support from another person to help them do something. Or it might be, that they want to enhance their health in some way. So if they're focusing on a value of well-being, it might be that they draw on other values of vitality or inner peace to help them to enhance that value of well-being. So just some examples there of a very simple coaching model that you can, there's 4 steps there that you can integrate values into that, and anybody can use that at any point. So again, I can send you the template for that and you can have a go for yourselves. Okay, any questions on that one? Okay. So we'll move on to decision making. So another part of the Living with Values step of the I Value program is helping people to use their values to make decisions. So really, really important here, because too many people make decisions based on fear, or they make decisions based on money, and then they make really, really bad decisions for themselves. So if you can use your values as your guide to help you to make good decisions, then you will not go far wrong. So this is just a very simple technique, but hugely beneficial. So this example that I've got here is a doctor that I was working with, and you can see his values are down the left-hand side here, where you've got a 1 and a 1. That's not a mistake. That's just because he said that making a difference and purpose were equally important to him. So we fill out the template with the values down the left-hand side here, and then consider. In this case, it was a choice of career. So he's decided he wanted to leave medicine, and he wanted to consider 5 different options of careers that he might go into. So often when people want to change careers, they really don't know how to make the decision. They think it's a good idea. They take lots of advice from lots of different people. But unless you look at what really matters to you, you can go very, very wrong in making decisions based on what other people tell you. So, and I see that a lot with the clients that I work with. They can actually see the decisions they've made. If they go back, they can look at decisions they've made and how wrong they were based on their values. And if they'd have understood their values at that point, then they would have made a different decision. So hugely important for everyone to check in with their values whenever they're making a decision. It doesn't have to be as big a decision as a career change. You can use it for very small decisions, like, what you're going to do at the weekend, or, taking up a new hobby or something. If you just check in with your values and see which of your values it's going to enhance, then you'll know that it's going to be something that's good for you. So in this instance, this chap was training as a trainee doctor, and he wanted to use his medical knowledge from the years of training that he'd had, but he just couldn't, for his own mental and physical well-being, he couldn't continue as a doctor. So we looked at 5 different options here, and you just list the options across the top. So we looked at medical journalism, publishing or editing, medical education, psychology, and being a medical scientist working in some kind of a pharmaceutical company. So what we then did is look at whether each option had a positive, a negative, or a neutral impact on each one of his values. Now, this is quite an analytical technique, but it really does make you think about what the impact is on each value. And the annotation of positive, negative, or neutral is so simple. You can just then at the bottom of each column add up how each one felt. So there's some subjectivity, but there's some analysis in there as well. So it's a really popular technique, and just so easy to use. So in this example, this client looked at medical journalism and saw very, very positive impacts. So you've got positives all the way down there, with just a neutral on freedom. He didn't think it really affected freedom particularly. So 9 positives and 1 neutral. Publishing or editing, he was less certain about. So there were some positives there, but he was very concerned about impact on love and compassion and creativity. Felt he would be working on things that he didn't necessarily want to be working on. There wouldn't be any compassion element necessarily, because he's not seeing any patients obviously anymore, and he felt there might be an impact on his relationship because of where he might have to work. The medical education, again, a hugely positive one. So actually that's got positive impacts all the way down. So that was a 10 out of 10. So that was a very positive option. He did consider psychology, so retraining, moving specialties into psychology. And that one was positive again, but with a lack of creativity and no element of freedom there. So probably more of a neutral impact than a negative one, but still not quite as positive as the other 2. Then he looked at scientist, and that had several very negative impacts. So whilst it was an option he was seriously considering, once he thought about it and the impact on his values, he then discounted that option. So it's not always cut and dried. You don't always get a very clear winner across the options, but what it does is it informs your decision making. So it gives you a really clear view of whether something's going to be good or not, and it allows you to eliminate options that are going to be bad for your values and can have a negative impact. And so you can then focus on the other options, do some more exploring, get some experience in those options, and see what works best. Where you've got he discounted option 2 and option 5 from this exercise, and then pursued the other 3, looking at getting some experience in those different things. And he's gone on to have a career which is split between medical journalism and medical education. So he's working part in the NHS and part outside for I think it's the British Medical Journal. So from this exercise, he then went on to find ways that he could use his medical knowledge, but in a different way, through passing on that knowledge through education and through articles in medical magazines. So I just wanted to share that technique because it's very, very useful. It's very easy to use. You can use it for any kind of decision making. You just have to have done the values exploration first, and then you can look at different options. I've used it for people deciding whether they were going to leave their husband or not, whether they were going to start a new relationship with someone or not, whether they're going to leave the country and go and live abroad, and considering different countries they wanted to live in. So it's a very versatile technique. You can use it for lots and lots of different things, but it just really, really focuses the mind on those values and the impact on them. So it really helps people to make good decisions. Okay, any questions on that technique? No, all okay, all clear with that one? Okay. Super. All right. So that just leads me to give you some contact points there. So there's more information about the work that I do on my website. So that's valuescoach.co.uk. You can email me if you've got any questions from what we talked about today and you didn't want to raise it in the session. That's absolutely fine. Just drop me an email. So lindsay@valuescoach.co.uk. My mobile's there as well. Happy to have a chat too. My book's available on Amazon. So Coaching with Values by Lindsay West, and that's available on Amazon, and you can buy it on Kindle or hardback, or paperback, whichever you prefer. I can put, let me just stop sharing the screen for a second. If I put in the chat, what have we got here? Okay, so people have put, oh, lovely, right. So you put your messages there for me to share. So Shehzad's site is positive, is quite straightforward, positive intelligence .com. There we go. So that's positiveintelligence.com. And if you go on to, if you want to do the, there's two surveys you can do. One is your PQ score, which tells you how much the saboteurs are controlling you. That's quite scary. It was for me anyway when I first did that about a year ago. So you get a percentage score for how much control they have or how much they don't. So the lower your score, the less control you have over yourself. The higher the score, the better. You're aiming for 75 plus to be in a good place, really. So that's one to look at. And then you can do the saboteurs assessment, and just through a series of very simple questions. Really be honest though, be honest in the answers, and do it on a kind of normal day, not when you're particularly angry about anything. Try and do it on a kind of normal day and do your saboteurs assessment, and that gives you a very, very accurate assessment of how active those saboteurs in your life are. And there's also more information about what what those saboteurs mean, and tells you what the lies of the saboteur tell you, and you'll be familiar with some of those, I'm sure. So it's quite an interesting thing to do, and it's a really, really good fit with values. So I've built saboteurs into all my values work at the moment, and I'll be doing some more workshops and training on that soon. So there we go. So any questions, any thoughts, anything anybody wants to share from that?
I would just like to say superb timing, mate. Just the right number of slides.
Unusually for me.
Bob on time. Brilliant. A huge amount of thought has gone into that presentation, I can tell. So thank you very, very much indeed. I can see Claire's got her hand up. Claire, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, and thank you so much. From what I've caught, was absolutely amazing. So I'm looking forward to watching the video back as well. Just about that saboteurs and the other questionnaire, is that on your website? It's
not. It's on the Positive Intelligence website. So I've just posted in the chat box there. If you do, it's very straightforward. It's just www.positiveintelligence.com. And if you look for PQ score and saboteurs assessment, I think they're called on that Positive Intelligence website. But if you do that and you have any questions or you want to learn more, do come back to me on that, because you can go through the website. But if you'd like to come back to me, I'd really like to build it in with the values piece for you, because not all of the PQ coaches will have the understanding of values that I do. So do come back and have a chat with me once you've done it, if you want some more support with it, because it's really important to get such a good balance with those values.
Definitely. Okay. Would you be able to pop your telephone number in, because you took it off the screen just before?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'll pop it in the chat now for you.
It's been great.
My pleasure. So it's 07795 975 980. There you go. Any other questions? I do appreciate it was quite a tell session today. It wasn't a very coachy session today, so I hope that's okay. It's just that with a group this size and not knowing quite a few of you, I didn't feel it would be appropriate to be demoing the techniques with anybody individually. So if you want to experience any of the techniques, do get in touch with me. If you want me to share any information, please do get in touch. Very happy to help. But I'll send the slides through. We've got all email addresses there. I don't have your email addresses from the booking, so if you just put them in the chat space there, and then we'll send out the slides and the templates as well for you. All right. Okay. I think that's dead on too. So thank you all very much for your input and attention this afternoon. Very lovely to be with you. Thank you to those that made a donation to the UK Values Alliance in lieu of attending today. If you haven't done so already, please go back on the website and make a donation. It's important work, and Charles nodding there. Yeah, it's the important work that the Values Alliance do, and do support. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Lindsay. That's brilliant.
And thank you, everybody, for coming.
Yeah,
and spread the word.
Indeed, absolutely.
Thanks, Lindsay.
My pleasure.
You're really generous with all your techniques and ideas as ever. So really, really grateful.
My pleasure. I'm just happy for people to use them.